Hi, I'm Paul Peterson.
And I'm Cameron Terriani. In this part, we discuss constitutional questions surrounding school choice. Paul, I thought the Constitution didn't say anything about education. What is in the Constitution that bears anything on school choice?
Well, you're right, Cameron. Nothing in the U.S. Constitution says anything about education, but the First Amendment to the Constitution says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Some people say this clause forbids the use of government money to support school vouchers that would enable parents to send their children to private schools with a religious affiliation.
And so the First Amendment creates a wall of separation between church and state?
Well, that is what Thomas Jefferson said, although it's not actually in the Constitution itself. The Constitution simply says that Congress cannot establish a religion. It's not clear that giving vouchers to parents who send their children to religious schools does in fact establish a religion. In other areas of public policy, government money routinely goes to institutions that have a religious affiliation. The best example is at the college level. There are many colleges and universities that have a religious affiliation, yet students who attend those schools receive tuition support, such as Pell Grants and student loans, and professors get research money regardless of the institution that they're working for. And you find the same thing in the medical care industry. Many hospitals have a religious affiliation, and government money from Medicare and Medicaid goes to these institutions. So just exactly what establishes a university is, some people say this wall is very curvy. It's not a straight wall, it's not a hard wall, it's a curvy wall. So just exactly how you keep government from establishing a religion is a matter of considerable contention.
So how about K through 12 schools? Can government money go to religious elementary and secondary schools?
The Supreme Court hasn't answered this question consistently. Two court cases, Nyquist and Zellman, reveal the ambiguity of the court when it comes to schools. So let's go to Washington, D.C., the city where the U.S. Supreme Court decided these two fascinating cases, Nyquist and Zellman. I'm standing in the Department of Education building in Washington, D.C., not far from the Supreme Court building, where the two important decisions involving aid to religious schools were decided by the court. The first was decided back in 1973, and it's known as the Nyquist case. And in that case, which was based on a law that was passed in the state of New York that gave money to schools that were religious in nature if students decided to go there because the public schools in the area were overfilled to capacity. So in that decision, the Supreme Court said aid to these private schools was unconstitutional. It violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. In 2002, quite a few years later, the Supreme Court ruled in the opposite direction. The case involved vouchers for students in Cleveland, Ohio. The Supreme Court said the instance here was money going for educational purposes, not religious purposes. The public schools in Ohio were not adequate. Low-income children were not benefiting from the education they were receiving there. And so giving them the opportunity to go to private religious schools was not a violation of the Establishment Clause. Now, what's interesting about these two cases is that it's very similar to Brown v. Board of Education, where the Supreme Court decided that segregated schools were unconstitutional despite the fact that the Plessy decision, decided many years earlier, had said separate but equal is constitutional. And in the Brown decision, they overturned Plessy without explicitly saying so. And once again, the Supreme Court in Zellman overturns Nyquist without explicitly saying so, presumably on the grounds that if you have educational purposes and your purpose is educating low-income children that are going to poor public schools, then vouchers to parents to let them go to private religious schools is in fact constitutional.
So has the constitutional debate over vouchers disappeared?
No, I suppose in part because the Zellman and the Nyquist decisions are still regarded as both law, but the debate has changed quite dramatically, focusing now on state constitutions instead of the U.S. Constitution.
Are you referring to the Baby Blaine amendments to state constitutions? What are these amendments?
The story of the Baby Blaine amendments is a fascinating tale from the 19th century. James Blaine, a senator from Maine, James Blaine, a senator from Maine, ran as a Republican candidate for president against Democrat Grover Cleveland, who was the winner in that 1884 election. The campaign was marked by religious conflict between Catholics and Protestants, so much a part of 19th century life. Cleveland was accused by one of Blaine's supporters as being the candidate of Romanism and rebellion, a reference to the Democratic Party's affiliation with the South, with the liquor interests, and with Catholics.
Well, Professor, what does all of this have to do with Baby Blaine amendments?
Well, Blaine tried to persuade Congress to pass an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that explicitly forbade aid to Catholic schools. And he almost won. The amendment failed to get the needed two-thirds vote in the Senate by just one vote, and it did pass the House of Representatives. So that gives you an idea of the strength of the anti-Catholic feeling in 19th century American politics. The anti-Catholic sentiment was in fact so strong that many states did pass their own state constitutions the very same amendment that Blaine had attempted to pass in Washington. So the amendments that were added to state constitutions became known as the Baby Blaine amendments.
So are school vouchers permissible in states that have passed Baby Blaine amendments?
That's another question that's never been decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, partly because there are doubts about the constitutionality of the Baby Blaine amendments under the U.S. constitutions. They've been tainted by the motives of those who passed them, now that we've passed beyond the debates between Protestants and Catholics in the same visceral way that took place in the 19th century. But school vouchers have nonetheless been found unconstitutional by Supreme Courts in Colorado and Florida. These state Supreme Courts have said that vouchers violate the unified school provision of the state constitution. Vouchers that would allow parents to attend religious schools have been interpreted as undermining a uniform system of free public schools.
So how do school vouchers violate the unified school provision? What was the purpose of those provisions in state constitutions?
Well, we think that the unified school provision was originally inserted into state constitutions to make sure that every part of the state was part of some school district, so that there would be school districts even in rural areas, not just in urban communities. But it does not seem to be the case that people expected schools to be completely the same. Schools are hardly uniform today. They vary enormously in quality from one school district to another. So it's not altogether clear why vouchers violate the unified school provision of state constitutions, but that's a matter of opinion, and what counts is the opinion of the judges. And the judges have decided in these states that vouchers do violate the unified school provision of the Constitution, perhaps because they have their own objections to school vouchers.
But that raises the question, what are the main criticisms of school choice?
Well, there are very important issues that have been raised by those people who have objected to school choice, and we give them careful consideration in the next part of this lecture.